Hello! We've all read the fairy tales about how beautiful princesses and their equally beautiful princes overcome all possible difficulties and as a result, live happily ever after. But is appearance actually of some importance in these stories? Not everyone in life can boast of perfect beauty. What if things were different in a fairy tale too? The peace of a magic kingdom, located on an island, is protected by 7 brave heroes, with Merlin at their head. They have slayed yet another dragon and rescued a princess. But she turned out to be green-skinned and ugly, so the heroes mistook her for a witch and gave her a beating just in case. For this mistake, the fairy princess punished the handsome men with a curse.
This was a nasty one that turned us into little ugly green monsters.
But as usual, the curse has a loophole. It only works if someone is looking at the heroes. And it can be completely removed with a kiss of the most beautiful girl in the world. The evil Queen Regina comes to a magic tree with a pair of ripe red apples on it. As the first rays of sunlight fall on them, the apples turn into red high-heeled shoes. The witch eagerly plucks them and tries them on. The spell fails, and the enraged queen throws the shoe at the floor, knocking off the head of one of her little wooden servant bears. At night, the king's daughter, Snow White, sneaks into the room with the tree. Her looks are not that of a perfect princess whose beauty would make her stepmother jealous. Despite her plumpness, she deftly climbs down the rope and hides from the guards. It turns out that this is the former room of the king, who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The girl does not lose hope of finding her father and looks for clues, and she succeeds. A diary falls out of a secret compartment of the table, in which the king describes how one day the palace guards brought a woman named Regina to the palace, who was accused of being a witch. The king did not recognize the wolf in sheep's clothing and fell in love. After the wedding, the woman brought a magic mirror to the palace, which was attached to the branches of the tree. And the more the tree took root and grew, the fewer servants there were around the palace.
Oh, nice. Regina, talking to a tree. She must be a witch.
And though the king had uncovered her evil plans, it was already too late. He only had time to hide Snow White in a secret room and tell her to seek help from the 7 heroes. He himself soon disappeared without a trace. While the princess was reading her father's diary, the dawn came, and in its rays, the girl notices bright red apples. The witch arrives only a minute late. Instead of the cherished apples, she finds a fairy tale beauty with a perfect figure and facial features in the room. The thief has put on her shoes. The stepmother unleashes her wrath on the girl, who she does not yet recognize as her stepdaughter. But Snow White is quicker and flies away through the window on a magic broomstick she took from the witch's servants. At this moment, the 7 heroes are sullenly walking towards their homes. Their strength and beauty are gone. What will happen to their careers now? They're thinking about how they can find the beauty to break the spell, when suddenly the girl, who has trouble handling the broom, flies over their heads screaming. Meanwhile, the queen turns to the magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest of them all?
It's side note, wisdom and kingdom don't really rhyme.
Cut the sass and...
From now on, the girl who stole the shoes is the most beautiful in the kingdom, but the mirror does not know who she is. It is indeed magic, but not to that extent. Time is playing against the old woman. She is growing weak and orders to put up banners all over the island to catch the criminal as soon as possible. The mirror also offers to contact a certain person who would be interested in finding the beauty. The dwarves reach their home and find the witch's broom, as well as its landing spot. They prepare to attack and rush inside, but stop immediately and can't believe their eyes. One of them, though, manages to come up behind the girl and smack the beauty on the back of the head. Snow White wakes up, and the dwarves greet her. The girl has no idea that her appearance has changed, and when she sees herself in the mirror, she guesses that it's the work of magic shoes. She decides to keep her real name a secret and calls herself Princess Red Shoes. The 7 dwarves introduce themselves too: the wizard Merlin and the warrior Arthur, the neat Jack with his invisible cloak and French accent, the skillful, shield-wielding cook Hans, and the 3 inventors Pino, Noki, and Kio. The dwarves have the same name as the members of the famous 7 heroes that Snow White is looking for, but they assure her that it's nothing but a coincidence. The heroes are missing too. They offer to help the girl look for everybody at once. In the process, of course, they hope to lift the spell with her kiss. Prince Obvious, who everyone calls Prince Average, is having a birthday party, and as luck would have it, all princesses are busy.
Princess Cruz.
That's a ship, sir.
Princess Leia.
She's the general. I demand glorious death!
The evil stepmother visits the birthday boy and shows him a portrait of a beautiful woman. If he finds her, he will get a companion of his stature, and the witch will get back her stolen shoes. They make a deal, and the prince and his 2 giant bodyguards set off in pursuit. In the evening, the dwarves are looking for ways to charm the girl, and Merlin even contemplates how he could attract her with magic. The girl, meanwhile, spots a dark silhouette in the window that resembles her father and runs off into the night forest. She desperately wants to find her dad, and of course, the figure turns out not to be a king at all, but a monster, a huge wooden rabbit.
You're a vegan bunny, right?
Merlin appears just in time. The pair flee from the leaping monster, and while the girl looks back, the wizard regains his former strength and appearance. The same happens to Arthur, who, however, is deprived of his strength by Snow White's gaze right in the middle of an attack. He pretends to be wounded to get the kiss he covets, but his friends appear to reveal his bluff. On his way home, Arthur doesn't give up trying, but only receives a slap in the face. The dwarves realize that they need a plan, otherwise they will only get in each other's way. At least one of them must break the spell. They split up to continue their search for the king, with Arthur going with Snow White and Merlin staying at home to guard the overgrown rabbit they caught last night. Arthur shows Snow White the Excalibur sword that is trapped in the stone. While the guy is showing off, the girl pulls out the weapon with ease. Her thoughts are pure and selfless. Arthur is shocked, and an embarrassed Snow White hurries to put the sword back. Arthur tries to repeat her trick, but all in vain. At this point, the grumpy dwarf gives up trying to seduce the girl, and they set off to the city in search for the king. Merlin, on the other hand, breaks the agreement and rides off to meet the adventurers on the rabbit's back. Snow White and Arthur arrive in the city. The girl receives extraordinary attention from men, each of whom wants to please her. Her portraits are hung all around the city. It's the job of the prince's bodyguards, who notice the girl and chase after her, but she takes off her shoes in time and escapes the danger. Merlin arrives in the city on a rabbit, which makes Arthur very unhappy. While they're figuring things out, the guards of the city begin to mock Snow White, who has lost her beauty, and take away one of her shoes. The princess calls for help, but the dwarves don't recognize her and pass by.
And I don't need anyone's help.
Snow White is surrounded when Merlin returns and knocks out the rest of the guards. He still does not recognize the girl and helps her out sincerely, not expecting a magic kiss in return. Snow White puts on her shoes and saddles up the rabbit to flee the pursuit with her friends. The princess reveals that they are looking for her because of her magic shoes, but doesn't mention the fact that she stole them. How can she find her father now, though, when she herself must hide? Merlin shows his wits by running around the field, making a huge sign, much to the girl's delight. The gnome's creative work is quickly discovered by the prince's bodyguards and the evil queen's 3 wooden hares, all heading right after our heroes to the castle. Merlin and Arthur argue again about who deserves the girl more. Hans displays his talents as a cook, and Jack gives a diamond ring to the princess. When suddenly they're ambushed by Average Prince and his army. Arthur and Merlin are quickly taken prisoners, and the other dwarves are ordered by the prince to surrender and give up the pretty girl. Snow White comes out of the castle, soldiers down with her beauty. Prince Average frees the dwarves, yet Snow White refuses the prince's offer to become his companion. He continues to insist.
I couldn't agree more. Subjects these days. Now, shall we?
The 7 heroes, with the exception of the 3 inventors, join the battle. The mage and warrior work well as a team and fight back with varying success. Hans saves Arthur with his shield, but they both are beaten by a huge soldier. This gives the invisible Jack the opportunity to save Snow White. However, there is nowhere to run from the high cliff. Luckily, the friends are saved by Pino, Noki, and Kyo, who have finally finished their battle machines. But the prince responds with a volley of cannon shots that knock the robot to the ground with an accurate hit. The cannonballs also damage the wooden facade of the dwarves' castle. At that point, Merlin provokes the enemy, and soon the huge structure falls directly on top of the prince's army, who has nothing left to do but shake off the dust and walk away. In the evening, Merlin and Snow White are alone in the barn. The girl notices that the guy is too fixated on appearance, while she doesn't care about it at all. The princess even enjoys spending time with the little green dwarf. Merlin, though, does everything he can to get a kiss. The girl decides to reveal her real appearance to the protagonist, but for some reason, she cannot take off her shoes, despite all her efforts. The princess failed the mission, and gets a visit from the angry queen. She threatens the unfortunate man and leaves him with apples, which turn Prince Average and his bodyguards into huge wooden monsters. The dwarves, meanwhile, are busy rebuilding the house, and the little inventors show the girl a copying machine that duplicates leaflets with her father's face. But in order to distribute them, they must be dropped from a height. Merlin finds a solution by retrieving a broom stuck in a tree. The characters are so caught up in their flight and dreams that they accidentally crash into a tree. They find themselves alone again, and Snow White tries to hint that she won't be as pretty without her shoes. Merlin replies that he knows what it's like to look different than how you're feeling. This phrase gives the couple a false sense of mutual understanding. They have no idea that they're talking about absolutely opposite circumstances. Snow White asks the magician for witchcraft paper, folds it, and leaves a red kiss mark on it. This is followed by the first real kiss. Merlin is overjoyed.
Ta-da! You just got Merlin! What do you think?
The dwarf is shocked. After all the conditions have been met. Maybe the kiss must be longer. All of a sudden, the couple is discovered by a wooden monster. The heroes flee and slide down a canyon crevasse. But even there, they find themselves surrounded. Luckily, the pursuers are clumsy, and the wizard's spell easily knocks them down. Then the monsters begin to throw stones. The dwarf and the princess are one step away from death. Then Merlin asks the girl to turn away so that his power returns to him. He is left one-on-one with the wooden Prince Average and blows up the Stoneland Bridge. The villain falls into the water, but manages to grab the wizard and drag him to the bottom. Snow White dives for her beloved. He is pinned down by a heavy stone. Now the shoes get off easily, and the girl frees the boy at the cost of her transformation. She drags Merlin to the shore, where a huge hare and cubs of the queen are already waiting for them. Through their sight, the mirror and the stepmother discover who has been hiding behind the shoe's magic all this time. The witch sets out to take revenge. In the evening by the fire, Merlin finally sees Snow White, undisguised by spells. She tells the whole truth. The boy asks why the princess didn't simply return the shoes.
If I'd given up their magic, you wouldn't have helped me find my father, would you? Would you?
If she weren't so beautiful, she'd be treated differently, and her doubts are not unfounded. As the girl looks away, Merlin leaves. Snow White puts her shoes back on, for no one needs her without them. The princess is sad, and remembers how there used to be a spark between her and the boy. Merlin is upset too. He remembers that Snow White wanted to take off her shoes much earlier, back in the barn, and it becomes clear to him that the girl fell in love with him at the time when he was convinced of his absolute unattractiveness. Merlin does eventually return, asks Snow White to take off her shoes, and for some reason offers the girl a red apple. This is another trick of Regina. The real Merlin, who actually changed his mind and came back, reveals it. The witch quickly grabs Snow White and teleports them both to the castle. The boy races after the kidnapper on the hare, and the wooden cubs take off to call the others for help. The heroes are armed to the teeth and raring to fight, but they're held back by Arthur, who's still struggling with his sword.
Oh, zut alors, please end this.
Merlin is the first to arrive at the villain's lair, and the hare leads him to the secret entrance. He fails to sneak in undetected, and Regina blackmails Snow White, threatening to kill the prisoner. The princess takes a bite off the red apple and begins to transform into an apple tree. The mirror interrogates Merlin, and we find out how the magic of the shoes works. Once you get what you want from them, the connection with the shoes becomes unbreakable. Nonetheless, Snow White did eventually take them off, so it's not that simple.
How could she possibly want to save you more than she wanted to be beautiful? What did you do to her?
The villains do not understand the magic of love. All they see is manipulation and deceit. Merlin also finds out from the mirror that once the bell rings 3 times, the Snow White apple tree will bear fruit, wither, and eventually die. The guy manages to use a spell and set himself free. The hero tries to make his way into the hall where Snow White is trapped, but he cannot do it alone.